You can have a seat. I just want to give a little bit of setup for the story that you're about to hear. You know, Brian said something this past weekend that really resonated with me when he said, if we can ever grasp this incredible picture that God is a father to us and that we are his treasured children, if we can embrace that fully, it's a game changer. It changes everything. You know, in this series, we're talking about the fact that it changes our need to try to find approval in all the wrong places. We're talking about how it changes our need last week to have our appetite satisfied from things that really don't satisfy. And this week, we're talking about how it will change our need for affirmation, our need for ambition, and really correct and make that a healthy, godly thing. And, you know, as I think about those things, as beautiful as it is that knowing God as Father leads to freedom from approval in other places. As beautiful as it is to know that if I can fully embrace my identity as a treasured child, it will lead me away from unhealthy appetites. As beautiful as those things are, the most beautiful thing is the fact that the gift that I get is the Father himself. I get the Father himself. You know, 3 years ago, my dad turned 80 years old. My earthly father turned 80 years old. And so I told him, I said, wherever you want to go for your birthday, I'll take you. Wherever you want to go, you and I will spend time together. And this was a couple months before I was going to have my first child. And I'm like, Dad, I just want to celebrate you as a father, and I want to take you anywhere. And I said, so think about it. Think about it. My dad's from St. Louis, so I thought he would definitely want to go to St. Louis. And so he calls me back in a week, and he told me, he said, son, I've really been thinking about your offer. Anywhere in the country, right? I said, yeah, anywhere in the country. And he said, if I could be anywhere in the country with you on my 80th birthday, I'd want to be in Cincinnati, Ohio, helping you put the crib together for my grandson. That's where I want to be. That's where I want to be. And that was the greatest gift my dad has ever given me. On his 80th birthday, the gift that I so-called gave him was the greatest gift he ever gave me. Why? Because he gave me the gift of himself. He gave me the gift of his presence, and we had conversations that week we had never had before. And it just shows me, that changed me. That changed our relationship. And I had a good relationship with him before, but it changed it. It took it to a new place. And that is what happens. That's the promise of what happens when we embrace our beautiful identity as children and recognize we have a loving Father who cares about us. And there's a guy that I recently interacted with who gets this. And he gets it from a very unique perspective, and I just thought we all would be encouraged and really, really built up by hearing his story. And so he's committed to being here tonight. He's a part of our community, a guy who, with his wife, has adopted 5 kids, and you're going to hear about the incredible story of how they got from where they are as a brand new couple to where they are today. It's just an incredible story. So Gregg Eichhorn is with us. If you guys would, let's welcome Gregg up. Have a seat, man. So, like I said, I recently interacted with Gregg. We talked about his story, and even today just kind of connected a little bit. I think just to give people context, Gregg, for who you are, it might help to tell people about your weekend plans. So Gregg has some unique weekend plans. The reason we wanted to have him here tonight. What are you doing this weekend?
So this weekend I have the privilege of going to the Arnold Classic. So if any of you know what that is, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger put on a sporting event for everybody, and I'm going to compete in the submission grappling sport.
Yes, submission grappling. I don't know what you're doing this weekend, but Gregg, and so I asked him to explain what that was, and basically what he said was he was into wrestling, but he said grappling is, whereas in wrestling, you can actually pin your opponent, there's no such thing as pinning an opponent in grappling. Basically, you just compete to the point of submission.
Right.
Or a broken bone, whichever comes first. So that's a little bit about what Gregg does in his free time. But yet, this guy has deeply impacted me from his story. So why don't we just talk a little bit about your whole your journey with God and kind of where that started for you. Talk about your childhood and what happened to your family.
Sure. Yeah. So growing up, I lived on the west side, so obviously I was Catholic. So I grew up being Catholic until I was probably about 12 years old. And when I turned 12 or right around there, my dad decided that something wasn't going right for him. He didn't agree with Catholicism, so he actually converted to Christianity. And my dad became a born-again Christian. And so from that point in time on in my life, I started attending Christian churches, a little bit more conservative Christian churches. and just consistently attended Christian churches, and so I've always been a good Christian, but just one that attends church, not one that really intimately knows God. So I then went on to the Big Vineyard, where I really resonated with Dave Workman there, and Dave really, I feel, brought it home, and I realized while attending there that this is my life, and I do want to give my entire life to God. He's always in pursuit for me, so I changed my life completely and went in pursuit for him. So,
And so you're jumping ahead a little bit, because as a part of that conversion, your parents took you out of school. You were going to parochial school.
Sure, yeah.
Took you out, and for the next 5 years, you were homeschooled.
That's right.
And so just a significant shift in your family rhythms and family life. And in the midst of kind of the homeschool world, at the age of 14, you met your wife.
That's right.
You didn't know she was your wife at the time, but talk about that. So how'd you meet your wife?
Yeah, so while I was being homeschooled, I went to a homeschool soccer team. It was just kind of a recreational soccer team. And so I saw my wife. She was 12 at the time. And so I thought she was beautiful then, and I knew her. I got to know her family real well. And we moved down to Price Hill. And so I continued to play soccer, but then when my wife turned 16, I was just fully in love with my wife. So on her 16th birthday, I gave her her first kiss, and we started dating from then very purposefully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, super purposefully. Like within 3 years of that, you were marrying her.
Yeah.
And as you guys were approaching marriage, some things had been happening in your lives, and you made a radical decision about what your family vision was going to be.
Sure. Yeah, my wife and I together collectively knew approximately what a family would look like for us. And we wanted a family that was going to be diverse, and we wanted a family that was going to just be a collection of a bunch of different kids from, all nationalities. And we didn't know exactly how it was going to look, but we knew it was going to be diverse, and we wanted a big family.
Yeah. You didn't know if that was running an orphanage. I mean, you had some ideas.
Yeah.
But then at some point, you decided to engage in the foster care system here in Hamilton County.
Yeah, after we had been married for a short time, we were still super young. We actually signed up for foster care classes as a 20-year-old, and I believe I was 22. So you're not allowed to be licensed until you're 21, but we knew this is the direction our life was headed. So we were foster parents. My wife was 21, and I guess I was 23. And we became licensed Hamilton County, state of Ohio foster parents, and started pursuing the goal of foster care. Yeah.
So you're young, very young couple, and you decide to take this direction. And actually, part of the reason you were motivated to do this is because what you had seen in your wife's family.
Absolutely.
So talk about what her family makeup was.
Sure. Yeah, my in-laws they're wonderful people, very godly-focused, conservative Christians, and being exposed to their family, I hung out with their family since I was 14 until I married my wife, and still hang out with them. And
that's a good thing. That's a really good thing.
But what I saw in their family was they were the first Hamilton County family, all-white family, to domestically adopt a black child into their family. And I saw this love for this kid that was black in this white family and in this different situation, and just how they embraced love and accepted him as one of their own. And instantly upon seeing that, I knew that was something that was key to my life, and that was going to be key to our lives together as my wife.
So you saw that, and that love just impacted you. And actually, one of the things that you said to me that blew me away was they adopted him in what year?
It was 1997.
1997. So 1997 is the first time in Hamilton County that a white family adopted a black child.
That's right.
And it was a big deal. I mean, you talked about local daytime talk shows wanted to interview them and all this stuff about that. But you were impacted by that. You saw something beautiful, and that set you and your wife on a path to do foster care. And so one day, you're signed up, you're licensed. You get a call that there's a beautiful baby girl.
Oh, yeah.
For you to bring into your home for foster care.
Sure. So we got this call. I was working at the time, and I think my wife was working too. And she called me and she said, "This is super exciting. We just got our first call." It was 3 months after we had been licensed, right around December, Christmas time. And I'm like, "Man, well, this is awesome." She said, "Yeah, it's a healthy baby girl. Can you believe this?" I said, this is amazing. I'm all over it. So I think I even left work early that day so we could call the county and say, hey, send her our way. So by the time I got home for work and we both called, this healthy baby girl had already been placed. So she's a healthy girl. We couldn't get a hold of her. So, we were disappointed. We said, man, this is our first call in 3 months, and we miss out on this healthy girl, not being able to be part of our family. So we said, well, this stinks, so we talked about it, and we said, well, maybe God has more in store for us. And so we just really prayed on that, and I guess God has more in store for us because we're not getting that girl. So.
So what happens next?
So what happens next is 3 days later, you get exactly what you asked for. And we said we could handle more. So we got a call with our first son. He's wonderful. His name's Elijah. And Elijah was this boy they called us about, and they said that he was born of a drug-addicted mom, and he had no brain activity for the first 18 minutes he was born. And so Elijah then had a sustained heartbeat of 30 beats per minute after that first 18 minutes of not having any brain activity. So his spinal cord was deteriorating. He was a lost cause. He was going to die within a month, and he inevitably would die within a month. He had no chance of living, but they needed a place. He was getting kind of big for the crib at Good Sam, big old boy, and so they needed a place to put him. So upon hearing that, they said, do you want him? And we said, well, man, I don't know. It's Friday. Let us think about it over the weekend because, we're not gonna make a decision for our life, instantly like that. So I was sitting at Westside Vineyard over in the Danbury theaters, and I prayed to God during the service, and I said, God, what do you expect me to do with this, And so God told me very vividly in my head, he said, I will heal your son. So upon hearing that, done. So I went and got my best friend, and, we went out to lunch that day, and we celebrated, and called the county as soon as we could Monday morning, as soon as they opened, said, hey, where's this kid at? I'm taking a couple days off work. Let's go meet my new son.
Yeah. And so you bring Elijah into your home, and actually one of the things that Gregg told me was the county had warned you that since he was probably going to pass in the next month, after he passed, there'd be an investigation. So
right. Yeah, the county had told me that upon his impending death, that after he died, especially since he was a foster kid, that they'd have to investigate us and very intently look into our lives and comb over our lives and investigate the cause of Elijah's death, even though he was inevitably going to die. So that was my first experience with the county saying, I'm sorry this is how it has to be, but you will be investigated and, we hope that charges won't follow.
Yeah. So do you still want him? Give us a call and let us know. So, one of the cool things about this story is we actually have a picture of Elijah, and I just met him. So here we are 4 years later, and Elijah is still hanging. And God is faithful. And actually, he changed your life.
Oh, man.
He changed. This is really where what's happening in your family started. So talk about what happened after Elijah.
Man, so my whole life I've been non-emotional. I've been, I've been a man, men don't cry.
That's right.
Men
break arms and grappling.
That's right.
That's what men do.
That's what men do, right? So, no, I was a tough man, and Elijah was the first time in my life that I can remember, crying over something and really having him break through emotionally to me, and knowing that he was going to change my life. I mean, decision to take Elijah meant I wasn't going to have retirement potentially. If God did what he said he was going to do and he healed Elijah, man, my life would look way different,
Because best case scenario was he'd still need a lot of care.
Absolutely.
For the rest of his life.
Yeah.
I mean, that was something that you went into it knowing.
Sure.
But yet there was this aspect of healing. Talk about some of the things that you did see physically change in him, though.
Sure. After Elijah was part of our family, we would pray for Elijah consistently. Every night we would pray for Elijah. We'd lay our hands on him. We'd say, God, heal our boy. Help him so much. Just help him feel our love. If he can't feel it with his mind, just let him know that we love him as much as we do. And we had a night, we were tracking his growth on these growth charts, and he's not even on the chart. I mean, he's so far below the chart that he probably should have been gone. And one night we were praying for his head, and the next night his skull popped, and we said, you know, what the heck's going on? And we measured his head, and his head grew 6 centimeters instantly, just from us praying for him and laying our hands on him and being consistent about asking God to fulfill his promise.
And incredible. And so where do you go from there? So Elijah's in your life, and you guys say, we're up for more.
Sure, yeah. We were up for more kids. We ended up getting a foster baby, a baby girl, and we had her for 2 months. And, you know, my wife was always a Elijah hog. She took him and wouldn't share him. And so I'd fight him away sometimes. We got a foster baby, and we had her for 2 months and just loved her to death. And she went back to her birth aunt. And ultimately, it was a good place for her, and I feel comfort in my soul about that now, that she went back to a good place. But still thinking about how she went back to her birth aunt, we got a call for our daughter Kamora, and they said, "Oh, Kamora's this healthy baby girl. Kind of, do you want to adopt her? She's kind of available." And so we said, "Yeah, sure, why not? You know, we can use some change." And we wanted some more kids. I mean, we love kids, and Kamora's now 4, and she's exceptional. She's as smart as a 6-year-old, and she's 4. And
Doesn't he sound like a dad? You know.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so you guys keep going. You're not done yet. So introduce us to the rest of you.
Yeah, so after Kamora was a very typically developing, even more so, she was more on the gifted spectrum of things. We said, you know, our family dynamic looks so different. Elijah makes everything seem easy when it comes to the medical community. Elijah doesn't really have a diagnosis. You know, he has hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, which means lack of oxygen to the brain. So if there's not a better description for a diagnosis, that's pretty, you know, unspecific. So we decided that we were only going to adopt medical kids, and we were only going to foster medical kids after that. So our next medical case was our boy Adric. And Adric came from a loving foster home, and we still talk to his parents and his old foster parents, and they love him to death. And they had dealt with some loss, and Adric needed a permanent place to stay, and he had stage 3 kidney failure disease. So Adric had to be catheterized, and so consistently being catheterized, it became progressively harder where the urologist couldn't even catheterize him. So they surgically implanted something called a vesicostomy in him, and so he leaks pee out of his surgical hole versus peeing it out like a regular kid would, just to protect his kidneys from, you know, pee backing up into his kidneys. So consistent prayer for Adric when we got him. We just prayed and prayed and prayed for Adric. So one day I go to the nephrologist at Children's Hospital. It's a rotating doctor, so it's not necessarily one we've seen consistently. And this doctor comes out, and she said, so his renal panel came back, and you know, Adric is so stage 3 kidney failure disease. And she pulls the paper out, and she's like, I really don't know. And she like crosses out the stage 3 kidney failure disease, and she writes a number 2 and says, stage 2 kidney failure disease now. So there's no real explaining why.
Wow. And we talked about this. I'm like, you know, I love the medical community, and used to interact in my old job with the medical community. And it's always amazing to me when doctors know the odds on things like this, and they experience what is a miracle, you know? Right. And it's like, it's just an incredible thing. And so Adric is doing well. And
oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just incredible to hear you talk about these kids and what they've meant to you.
Sure.
And you're not done. I mean, you got...
Sure.
You know, there's more kids to introduce, and you guys are open to other kids. You know,
yeah.
And I just to fast forward a little bit in the story, you know, so here you are, 27 years old. When you're 19 and a half, you and your wife decide that you're actually not going to have your own children,
right,
but instead are going to commit to adopting other kids. And not only other kids, but other kids who really have a high level of need. And I was just blown away by that. I'm like, so what is it about your life story, or what it is about anything that makes you do that? And I was really blown away by your answer, and it really made me think about the series we're in right now. So why do you do this? What's your motivation?
So my identity is the only thing I have. I'm nobody special. I mean, you can look at me and tell I'm not really anybody super special. The only thing I have that I really hold key to is my identity that God's given me. So I fully entrusted my life to Jesus, and I am God's adopted. In Galatians 4:7 that I had tattooed on my arm, it says, "So you are no longer a slave, but a son, and since you are a son, God has made you also an heir." And I got most of a back piece about Romans 8 and how I'm adopted as well. And I am God's adopted. God adopted me into his family. That's an identity that I took on, that God handed me and gave me. And I so passionately saw that in my wife's family. And I really clung to it. And so that's what made me decide that I was just going to be an adoptive parent. We weren't going to strive to have biological kids because there's no distinction between a biological kid and genetics. A wise man once told me that the least of things that you pass along to your children is your DNA and your genetics. That's the least of what you pass on to your kids.
Man, and I just want to say, we might not necessarily say this on the weekend, but I want to say what he just said is spiritually profound. What he just said is absolute truth. It's truer than any other way we think about our identity. There is no difference. There is no difference, and it's very interesting when you see things in the physical that model what's true in the spiritual. There's no difference, and that's what the Bible says about our adoption. There's no difference. One of the things that I love about the choice that he and his wife made is they wanted to intentionally diversify their family, to even emphasize the point that there's no difference, and it doesn't take blood and DNA to be a father to a child. And one of the stories you told me was impactful to me personally, and it was about an experience you had with your daughter, Kimura, who is a beautiful black girl. And I want you to just share that story as we wrap up a little bit with your story here. I just think this is a great place to land.
Yeah, sure. So Kimura, my wife was at the hospital or something with Elijah, and so I walked into Kimura's room, and I was laying her down to bed and giving her a kiss for the night. And she said, "Daddy, you haven't always been my daddy." And I said, no, I haven't. You know, you're adopted, but now I'm your forever daddy. And so she then said, "So what happens to all the kids that don't have mommy and daddies?" And I, taken back, I said, "Kimura, I'm not sure. Hopefully they find a good family, or somebody takes them in, and somebody really wants to be their mommy and daddy, and they have a great family." And so she then, I believe she was 3, said, "Well, I have an extra bed, and why can't they live here?" So my 3-year-old sitting there, and I said, "Well, then you wouldn't be the only princess." And she said, "It doesn't matter. And then they'd have a mommy and daddy." And so,
man, that's the identity eclipse. There's a book that we've talked about really has been impacting a lot of our personal journeys on this, Spiritual Slavery to Spiritual Sonship. And in that book, he talks about something. First, I want to show this picture. This is from the first week of the series. This is all your beautiful kids right there. Isn't that a lovely family? It's a lovely family. We talked about the idea of being a treasured child, and that what God wants for all of us is an identity eclipse. What God wants is that our identity as a treasured child, in the same way that all of these kids who look different, their identity is so eclipsed to now they're an Eichhorn. That's their core identity. And when that happens, you just want to give that away to other people. I mean, that's what your daughter is modeling, is once you receive the Father's love, all in you wants to do is give that away to other people. And so for Gregg and his wife, they've chosen to reflect the character of their father by adopting other children and physically living out that spiritual principle. And for all of us, that may not be the call for all of us. I do want to say this, though. I don't think it's a disconnect, and I don't think it's a coincidence that in the midst of this series on adoption, this series on what does it mean to be a treasured child of God, that we're hearing from people who are living out of that identity, and it's causing them to physically take in children. That is clearly something that happens as a result of this in many lives, and I think some of you are feeling that stir. You've been feeling that stir for a while. I just want to encourage you, You're not alone, and I want you to come back this weekend because we're going to have some specific action steps that we can take as a community to go after kids in the same way that Gregg and his family have. And so I just want you to know that, and I want you to come back for that. And even if that's not your call, what is everyone's call, my call, why I'm so encouraged by your story, why I'm so challenged by your story, is God is calling me in my life to reflect the love that I received from him. That's what he's calling us to do, and that's what we see in Gregg. Dude, you're a hero. Whether you win that tournament or not this weekend, you were the freaking man. You were the freaking man. Thank you very much, man. All right. So I told you tonight is about Sook. You can sit down. Gregg, we feel like we're in the Catholic Church again. We're doing a lot of rising and sitting tonight. It's really cool.